for the outreach workshop, the Prep School Negro. After about a year and a half of conversation, we're fortunate to have Andre Robert Lee with us this afternoon to show his film and lead us in a conversation around the opportunity costs surrounding the admission and matriculation of students of color at independent schools. So I want to briefly introduce you to Andre, then invite him to talk a little bit more about himself and the screen that he's going to share with us, which is a deeply personal labor of love. So Andre, in the time since his graduation from Connecticut College, moved to New York City to my old neighborhood, East Harlem, to teach, and shortly after went on to graduate school and then joined the Ford Foundation, where he was involved with research grant proposals, and that's actually what led him to the film industry. His involvement in the film industry has allowed him to be involved with films such as Shakespeare in Love, Cider House Rules, and several others that we're all familiar with. He has marketed the works of actors such as John Leguizamo, Rosie Perez, and Marissa Tomei. After his exposure to the marketing and distribution side of the industry, Andre decided to try producing. His first two short films were Friday Night Fever, which was created in partnership with Donna Karan, and Ecology of Love, starring Pharrell Williams. His most recent labor of love is The Prep School Negro, the film we're all gathered here this afternoon to enjoy. Over the last 2 years, Andre has embarked on a national outreach workshop tour that has allowed him to share his reflections on the opportunity costs associated with independent schools, education of students of color. We're delighted that after nearly 2 years of competition, as I've said, we're welcoming him to Yale for the first time. This, I believe, is Andre's 153rd or 4th? 154th showing of the film. So without further ado, welcome Andre. Thank you for being here.
Good evening, everyone. Good afternoon, I should say. Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon. It's great to be here today. It means a lot to be on the Yale campus. And I didn't know how to really pack a weekend, so I had this huge bag for 2 days. And we're sitting outside after the concert, trying his autograph. He comes over and he goes, "Hey, you know, it's awesome you're going to go on the road with us, but..." And I was like, "It's just a big bag. I don't plan to leave college on the road." So it's always fun to come back here to Yale and see. And I have lots of friends here, so we'll talk about that as we go on. So the film we're watching tonight is The Prep School Negro. This is my first version of the film. This one is good. It's going to get anything better. We worked out 2 versions to possibly qualify. And I said, "What do you think about it?" Yes. You know, and we worked them. Now I have a longer version, which is 71 minutes long, that will potentially qualify. Nothing's guaranteed. But I like to tell folks is that when I speak to children in high school, I say it's that moment when you hand in a paper and the teacher says, "No, this is really good," but you give it back and tell kids that continues in adulthood. So rewrites are really important. I'm going to read something to you and then explain it afterwards, and then give you guys a little assignment as you go watching the film. And then we'll watch, and then we'll come back for a question and answer after the film. The beauty of being human is that each person is different. We independently define ourselves by the ways in which our experiences set us apart, prove that we are unique, individual, and special. However, there is a clashing nature ingrained in human existence. The desire to belong to a bigger community is innate and eternal. While we profess our superiority intellectually and developmentally over the animal kingdom, we're still victims to an intrinsic fear of loneliness and isolation. The result of these 2 incompatible human traits is judgment and exclusion, as the qualities that make us different suddenly transform into criteria and where certain people excel over others. Race, religion, and economic standing function some of the distinctions inevitably relied upon by a society to dictate social structure and organization, as people of similar backgrounds find consolation and identity through shared experiences. Yet this alignment of people fails due to the simple reality that these broad generalizations solely lead to stereotypes that overlook the individual characteristics that truly define human life, to the extent that people fall into the cracks of our own segregations. Clothes, skin color, and speech are not the attributes that form the identity of a person. However, our judgments are based off these superficial representations simply because that is what we see and what we're trained to expect. Without the time to appreciate the true stories of each person's life, there cannot be an understanding of dissimilar practices, as human experiences are too distinct to each individual. Judgment spurs from this lack of understanding. However, realistically, it is ignorant to believe that each person has the capability to be exposed to the point of accepting each other. The only solution is to appreciate that our universal need to think in terms of these judgments is in fact the unifying basis of humanity. This struggle for companionship is an underlying connection that we all share, and only when the diversity of each life is approached with respect can human species truly become one. I went to a high school, early on in the career of this experience, life of this experience, I should say, at a school called Horace Mann. It's a school in Riverdale, right outside of New York City. And I walked into the school, and there were 1,400 kids in there. It was a required assembly. They're stood off the balconies, and I was a little nervous. And I had a kid walk up to me at the beginning and say, you know what, I'm being forced to watch this film, and I know it has nothing to do with me. And I said, okay, great, we create critical thinkers, bring it on. And a teacher came up to me about 2 months later, and she said, I was really bothered with you after the assembly because you destroyed my curriculum for the afternoon. We were going to talk about Shakespeare, but instead the kid wanted to talk about your film. And I was like, yes. And so she said, well, she had the kids where they all got together and wrote essays, and they put a collection of essays together called Our Diverse Voices. And this is written by a 10th grader at the school. They asked for remain anonymous, so I don't know if it's a boy or girl, their ethnic background. And my thinking is, while there's some run-on sentences, I think for the most part, this is a really strong and compelling piece for a 10th grader to be writing. And when you think that way, my thought is, okay, this film is doing something right. I was very pleased to have that after getting that response from the students that this wasn't about them. So what I ask you to do when you watch the film is think about where your heart and your mind meet. Where does your heart and your mind meet? Where does the emotional part of yourself and the intellectual part of yourself come together? And see if you can find yourself in the film in various ways. This isn't a story of every single African American that's going into a private school with a scholarship. It's my own individual story. I spent time with a few children who went to schools like mine, but this really is my own personal story. This is not how every African American child experiences. And I say that because a number of students have asked me to communicate that with audiences. I often think, an audience can handle it, they should be able to process that, but I think it's important to express that. And now for your assignments. I want you to do 3 things while watching the film. I want you to think about your reaction to the title when you first heard the title. What was the first thing that ran through your head when you heard the title of the film? After watching the film, do you have that same thought, the same reaction to the title, pre and post? We'll compare and contrast exercise. The second exercise is what film do you imagine going to see today? When you walked in, maybe some of the trailers, some of the posters, got the emails, what do you imagine you're going to see today? After watching it, is it the same film or is it different? And the third one, I've been living and working as an artist for over years, and I really love words, and I've been collecting words, and I love people to share with me, you can do it here or elsewhere, the one word that comes to mind when watching the film. What's the one word that comes to mind? And I've used this great social networking website I discovered called Facebook. You guys have heard of it? A lot of people on it. We have a Facebook fan page, and what we've done is we've asked people to go and post that one word on the fan page. And what that has done is that it's helped dialogue around the country. There's a phrase that we developed, psychological homelessness, that many students in this position often face. And one of my jobs, I think, is to combat that. So to review your assignment for tonight, we're going to think about the title before and after. What was our reaction to the title before and after watching the film? And then secondly, what film do we imagine we're going to see versus what we did see? Is it similar, different? And then finally, that one word that comes to mind. And once again, Amir, thank you so much for pushing really hard for a long time to get me here. It's really an honor to be here. And I have to give one more shout out to a dear friend of mine, Sean Wilkinson, who was the head of school at Germantown Friends School when I was in Sean Wilkinson, a man who means a whole lot in my life. And so, once again, thank you so much. One more little note. We're going to keep the lights down until after the credits roll, and there's a shot that pops up after the credits, and then I'll come up and we'll have a quick discussion. So once again, thank you so much, and I will see you guys. She's one of the people, when the camera was in the room, and she said, get that camera out of my face, and she posed. So it's worth having that shot. So as I said, I don't want to lecture you. I thought now we take some time. I think I want to ask a question. Now we need time.
Germantown Friends, but what are some of the things you learned about navigating different spaces, difficult spaces, from your mother, who seems to have overcome lots of trials her own self? So I would love to know some of the things you learned outside.
Even making this film, some of those sort of come out, and I understand. As I said, I've been on the journey with this project, and I've shown it this is 154th time I've done these workshops and conversations. And beforehand, John Wilkerson said to me, he said, "You're nervous?" And I said, I'm not, you know. And when I was a little kid, my mother was very active and busy in her church. And she was always the head or the president or the chairperson, the chairwoman of this event or that event. And I would watch her go and speak to audiences. Little kids, 6 years old, sitting in the front row, wanting to go home and watch TV. But instead, we're going to sit and learn about what the fundraiser for the Women's Day, or the Youth Day, or the bake sale, etc. was about. And I saw her community activism and her leadership, you know, and saw her with how proud she was of her existence and how she survived in the face of things. I also, and it's very interesting as I watched the Occupy situation in the country, I've been thinking about this. You know, my mother, she could have made more money, she could have received more funds at some point, receiving welfare, than actually what she gave in her job. And she refused to take it because she said, "I want you guys to see me working." I remember hearing her say that, you know. And I remember being like, "We'll get more money this way." And she was like, "No, you know, you need to see what working means in surviving." I saw her, you know, manage an entire household with the three of us, you know, and almost lose the house as a result of some work with my father and maintain and get it back. Well, $13,000 a year, and that was a good year, you know. So perseverance, you know, a sense of self, you know, that I think she couldn't really truly express, but it came out in other ways. Another point I learned about her posthumously, when I went to Germantown Friends School to show the film to get permission to sort of take it on the road, we had a screening, and someone in the audience said, "You know, how did you first truly learn about Germantown Friends School?" And I said, "Oh, my mother saw this family therapist, I think, of some sort in Philadelphia. I don't really know who he was." And I said his name was Stephen Rook. And someone said, "Oh, you know, I know Stephen. I have his number on my desk." And someone else said, "Yeah, I have his, he lives on the street from me." And I called him up, and he goes, "Oh, Andre, you know, you worked at the Ford Foundation, you worked at Miramax, you live in East Village." And I was like, and you are, you know? And he confessed that my mother saw him secretly as a therapist for 8 years. You know, so the value of therapy, which is inside me, which I believe in, I didn't know I had that connection with her. And he said the first day she walked in there, she couldn't say Germantown Friends School, but she's like, "My boy is different and needs something else." And that's how they worked together and got me to basketball camp, you know. So she had this blind drive to make things better, you know, and to help her kid who needed something else that I wasn't aware of. I was a snotty-nosed kid, you know. That scene, and this scene has got me to a lot of black women, where she's getting her hair done in the living room, you know. As I watch it, when I was a kid, I was so like, "Oh my God, these people are so embarrassing." Like, I was on the porch tapping my foot. And as an adult, I watch, and I see the intimacy and the connection, the relationship, and the fellowship that they were doing. And I was outside of that for so long, you know, which is part of the problem. And looking back on it, you know, and luckily she and I did a conversation towards the end of her life, apologizing on both sides. You know, she said, "I wish I had held you more picture of. I see what that means now." And I said, "I wish I wasn't such a difficult kid." And we built and learned and grew together in those last moments. But everything about myself I learned from that woman. You know, that's why it's a hard question to answer. And I say that because when I began making this film, I didn't know that. I really didn't know that. And as I made this film and unfolded, and she took over, as she always does, you know, in the filming process, I was like, wow, this film is about me, but it's really about her, and about our relationship, and about the situation of a lower-class, struggling African-American woman, and her intense work to survive and make it in our society.
Has it changed?
It's interesting because, and I met a gentleman here tonight, I'm forgetting your name. Anthony. Yeah. Anthony's sister came to a screening at Swarthmore College. And my sister had come to a number of events, and she was kind of like, okay. And, you know, she steals the show. I tell her, she knows it. She's like, you lead the movie. And she had come to a number of events, and we had talked about stuff, and she confessed to me that, she said, I had issues that you were the one who went away, and I was still home, but you were celebrated. And I was home making things happen, and you were this guy who was away doing stuff, and that was tough. She expressed, she said she had a little bit of envy of my experience at school, but not a lot. Because I say it myself, she went to JFS, she would have burned it to the ground. JFS was not the place for my sister, that's like clear. But at that screening, she spoke with Anthony's sister. Tell me your sister's name? Latricia. And I saw the two of them talking. It was a very emotional conversation. You know, and both were in tears and hugging and talking, and I was like, what's going on over there? You know, and I talked to my sister after, and she said, I didn't realize the impact this film is having on people. I didn't know people needed to tell their story and needed to hear these ideas. And it was in that moment, and I was like, well, you see why I made it, right? And she's like, yeah, I think I do. You know, so of course she was like celebrating her mother made a movie, and it was really great. But as we went along and talked more about this situation, and she saw people reacting to the film, I think she really began to understand what I was really getting at. And this happened a while ago. This is when I was in college. We had this big argument because she went to business school and all this other. She didn't go to college like I did. And we were in this big debate, and I was like, you should go to college and look so much better. And she stopped and said, Andre, not everybody wants what you want. You have to accept that. And that was really hard for me because I was like, you would thrive in college, you're so smart. But I had to accept that we all take different paths. And that's been, in our relationship, that's what we've been doing, is accepting each other in our difference. We've become so much closer than I ever imagined. You know, that conversation in the kitchen we had really was the first time that we sat and talked about it. We tried to recreate it. It's a little bit harder, you know, you don't have a film crew around you. But we've recreated that conversation, and we really, we've become really relying on each other. Our relationship has been a complete 180. It still has ways to go, you know, as every brother and sister.
And I finished prep school in 1954. And I've never seen a school like Germantown Friends. It was so different from my experience. It's an amazing thing for me to see what's happened to education. I don't think we had one black person in my prep school class. In my Yale class, I think there were 2 black people. And I don't remember which reunion it was, but there was a black fellow standing there, and somebody walked over to him and said, "Who are you?" He said, "I can't imagine you don't remember me. I'm the only black person in the class," which I thought was pretty interesting. On another subject, how did you go about making this? It looks like you started to do the filming when you started Germantown Friends. There's all these clips from when you were young.
On VHS tape, and I digitized it. You know, I just went back and pulled and research. You know, luckily I got an master's in education. I know about researching. You know, so I know how to go back and dig into the files.
When did you start the film?
I started the film. It was 9 years ago that I decided to make it a documentary. I had the title since 9th grade. I knew I was going to do something in my life called Prep School Negro. I didn't know. I thought it'd be a book, which it will be. You know, I have a literary agent. But I thought it'd be a book. I thought it'd be a journal. I wasn't sure what it would be. And it was 9 years ago. I was working on a film called Rocket Side, directed by Jeffrey Blitz, who did a documentary called Spellbound. And I was walking down the street, and I was like, oh, it's a documentary. So I spent about 3 years raising the money, and literally when the funds fell into place, it was the same moment my mother had a stroke. So the film was going to be just a survey of children in schools. It became something much more personal. So it was a very long process.
It's also interesting to see that black people in your era seem to have a dual struggle. They had a struggle to fit in with the white people at the schools you chose to go to. And then they had the struggle leaving your home and the traditions of the home.
Mm-hmm. Well, I really think everyone actually has that struggle. Because you grow up and you become somebody different. I remember there was a white friend in college saying to me, oh, growing up means killing your parents. And I was freaked out by that at the time. And I just said, well, it meant that we all go off in a different direction. What makes it unique for someone in a prep school experience like mine is the situation becomes exaggerated. Because for one, you're one of a few, you know, and you don't have that larger community, the critical mass to give the support and help with the development. But I mean, you make a very fair assessment in terms of that dual consciousness, which is a phrase old in black people here in America. And many of our great literary figures have written about it, discussed it. And I think that, yes, it is a struggle and a challenge, and part of making this film is to bring about that conversation. And I really do think many people, many others can relate to it, but I take what you're saying in terms of African Americans having a situation. That's why we developed the phrase psychological homelessness. You know, I said that to some kids in high school, and they're in tears. They're like, oh my God, you just expressed what I'm feeling. I couldn't articulate, you know. And you remind me actually, one young woman in the film Bree, the young woman who was crying, she made me promise, she said, tell me that I'm okay. So Bree is okay. You know, Bree watched that footage, she was very, very quiet and very nervous, and she sat there and she said, there's a pimple in the shot, can you get rid of that? I said, you are a 16-year-old girl. And also with that point to stress is, with the 4 children you saw, 2 of them are scholarship recipients and 2 are not. And I intentionally to say who was not.
Whether she was shutting the camera or performing for it. Almost everyone you've interviewed seemed not to be aware of the camera. How did you succeed in getting them to relax?
It's writing something smart. Not very hard for him, but that was a joke. What I did is I had a production team, 2 women who made the film Jesus Can't Boys of Baraka. They were my producers, Heidi Yu and Richard Brady. And they were really instrumental in helping me learn about making, because I've been a narrative filmmaker for a while, learning about making documentary filmmaker. And they brought them a number of camera people they had, two women and 1 man. Tony Hartman was the main camera guy. And Tony had tricks where he'd walk in the room and we start the interview and he'd hold the camera and would slowly bring it up, you know, and knew how to bring it down, you know. And then I think also the conversations I had, the people were so ready for the conversation. That young girl Bree, after we talked, she said this is the first time she's ever spoken about this. Because she's from a well-to-do family. And she said, I thought that my story didn't matter because I don't want to complain to my parents because they're paying so much tuition. And then the black kids don't really get my experience and the white kids really don't get my experience. So I just kind of sit a little bit and cry, you know. And then with my father, you know, I felt that that was some sort of expression of love that he had because he really threw himself on the sword again and again and again and just opened and talked. So, Mary, I think it's a few things. It's having a strong production crew that helped me think about how to get folks to look that way. Folks' interest and ability and desire to take part in this discussion, you know. And then also, I mean, if I can pat myself on the back a little bit, like I'm pretty good, as you may remember, good at talking to people. I got stuff out of you back in high school, but he's my headmaster, I think I said before. But I think it was those 3 things married together, you know, are one of the answers to pulling it out. You'd be surprised at how people actually do open up when the camera's in the room, when you get them to relax and have a conversation.